Hi and welcome back, it's Lois here. Today I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a pen and watercolour, or as they call it, line and wash of a prehistoric hill fort a few miles away from me in the southeast of England. It's called Chanctonbury Ring, and it consists of an amazing ring of trees on top of a hill. It's a landmark that could be seen from miles around, and it's very beautiful. So I'm going to start off with a piece of Saunders Waterford cold pressed £90 quarter imperial sized watercolour paper, and I'm just using a cheap old Bic mechanical pencil to roughly draw in the position of the trees. Some of the trees blew down in the Great Hurricane in the late 80s, so there is a gap in the ring, which is what I've just drawn just there, and you can see the far side of the tree line. Now I'm going to use Indian ink, waterproof Indian ink, and I'm going to use my homemade stick pens. Now I make these myself from just driftwood sticks that I collect from my beach, and I carve the ends and just dip them into the ink and use them like that. I find it gives a nice expressive line, and obviously different size pens will give you a different type of line. Now I'm going to use this fine pen first to start drawing in the tree trunks and the branches. Now I'm leaning most of my trees across towards the left because it's a very windswept place. It's quite barren, and atmospheric and very beautiful, and I want to try and capture that if I can. I'm going to put the trees all quite close together, just working quite quickly and simply, but making sure that my lines aren't too repetitive, that the trees and branches kind of cross each other, so that the branches look natural. I'm also trying to keep the trunks and branches thicker at the base and tapering off towards the top, where the branches are finer, and where they grow out into canopies and twigs and things. Because these pens don't have reservoirs, you have to keep dipping the pens into the ink, and be careful, wipe off the pen, make sure you don't get a huge great blob on it if you're doing fine lines like this, so that you don't make a bit of a mess. Now I'm just going to pull up some sort of scrubby undergrowth under the trees as well, across the top of the hill, and just keep putting in more branches. As the ink runs out, I'm just able to make a fainter line, so it gives the impression of distant twigs and finer twigs, etc., etc. So it's just a matter really of working back across the tree line like this until I get it looking how I want it to look. I want the trees to diminish in size as I progress towards the right, so that there is the impression of this being a group of trees on top of a curved hilltop. Now we've moved on a little bit further. I've done exactly the same on the left side, and now I'm using my much larger stick pen, and I'm going to put in quickly and loosely and with lots of ink. I'm going to put in the canopies where all the twigs and leaves and things are growing really closely together. So I'm just going to put these in as large black masses, leaving some light areas here and there, just for what they often call bird holes, or just so you can see the light through the trees in places. There are 2 very full tutorials for this on Patreon, so if you like the look of this, then maybe follow the link below and take a look. But bear in mind, if you were going to join Patreon, it's probably not a good idea to join yet, because you'll be charged when you join, and then you'll be charged again on the 1st of the month. So if you want to join us, then wait until the beginning of September. Right, that's nearly it for the canopies on this side. Just balancing things up a bit. I will go in with the finer pen and put in some linking branches and things like that, just to take away from the harshness of the outline. Carefully bring it over the front of that canopy, that main tree. I wanted to be quite careful there and keep a good shape there. Now over to the other side, more of the same. Could probably have done this with a brush, but I quite like the mark making that I get from the wooden stick pens. It's quite a sort of unique look. Now I'm going to bring the marks down to the base of the hill there, because that will represent some bushes. Just finishing off now with the finer pen, just to get a few more fine branches in. Just looking to see if the drawing needs balancing out anywhere. I think it's important with a drawing like this to not get bogged down with the area that you're doing, but keep your eye on the whole drawing, because one small change can influence or affect how the whole drawing looks. And you know, by putting a branch in somewhere, you might have to balance it by putting one in somewhere else, if you see what I mean. Right, now I'm putting in the shadows. I'm just following the contours of the hill and pulling down with my large pen just lines to represent the trees' shadows as on the slope of the hill, trying to be aware of the perspective of the hill as well as the shape if I can, and try and indicate that through my shadows. I'm just taking the finer pen and going to put in a few finer shadow lines. I think that's about there. That's about done. Now here's the finished line drawing or ink drawing. I've put in a few birds just flying off as if they've been startled out of the trees. Now the next stage is to paint it. So I've waited for the ink to be completely dry, overnight preferably, when it's very thick ink like this, because I don't want to disturb it at all. So I'm going to wet the sky, and I'm going to use my large calligraphy brush. It's made of goat hair, and the hairs are about 3 inches long, so it's very large. It holds a lot of water, but it stops me from fiddling. I think when you've got quite a complex ink drawing like this, you want very, very simple washes. So I'm using the big brush to stop me from fiddling, and I'm also only going to use 2 colours. The first one is raw sienna, because I want a nice glow in the sky, and the second one will be lamp black, just to give me a windswept stormy sky and to enhance the shadows on the hill. So I'm mixing up a fairly rich mixture of the lamp black for the sky, and I'm going to start here above the trees using directional brush strokes. Now I have to be really careful here not to obscure the dark of the trees with dark black paint, otherwise it won't show. Dark against light and light against dark is very, very important. So I'm going to use a clean damp flat brush and just pull out some of the paint, or lift out some of the paint with the flat brush, and just lighten up so that we can see the tree detail a little bit more, or the light through the trees, shall I say. And now some tissue again to lighten up, and using the tissue under the trees so that we're allowing the light to come through the trees a little bit more, keeping a nice dark stormy sky but without getting in the way of the ink work. Right, I think that's okay now for the white and the grey of the sky. And now I'm going to go back with a fairly rich mixture of the raw sienna and just pull up that glow across the base a bit more. Just dabbing it in, not too much, but just enough to have that nice glow on the horizon behind the hill. It's time to paint the shadows on the hillside now. I'm going to use lamp black, and again I'm going to be quite careful here. It's tempting to paint across the whole of the hilltop, but I'm going to just try and enhance and increase the tone around some of the shadow marks that I've already put in with ink. I want to keep quite a lot of the light coming through the trees that I have got on the hill. So it's just being careful to balance, keep a balance between the amount of shadow and the amount of white paper that I leave. Now that's finished, I think, to that stage, and let it completely dry before the next phase of painting the hill a bit more, adding highlights. Now I've just made myself a nice cup of coffee, and I'm going to take a look at it before I put the highlights onto the hill. I'm very pleased with the way the lifting out has worked and the amount of white paper that I've left in the sky. It adds a nice amount of light. There are soft edges and hard edges, and the shadows come down across the hill quite nicely. I think I just need a bit of a raw sienna glow, sort of reflected light from the sky onto the hillside in places. Again, I need to be careful not to overdo it. But using this large brush will help me not to overdo it, and it will help me not to paint as if I'm colouring in, just to paint large patches really. That's what's, or large brush strokes. Right, a bit more thick rich raw sienna, I think, just here over on the left, and then just maybe a few more touches, light touches here and there, following the sort of perspective of the shadow lines as well, keeping everything painted, all the brush strokes in the same sort of direction. Well, I think that's about finished now. I think I like that. I think it's captured the sort of fresh atmosphere that I wanted, the windswept look of the hilltop, and it was a lot of fun to draw and to paint. Well, I hope you'll give this a try, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And let's now take a look at the finished painting and the sort of crop that I would do for framing it. Yeah, like this, I think. And I think it's got quite a nice look, even though the colours aren't natural. I think it's effective, and it works for the kind of look that I was going for. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.